The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brooks Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brooks Show, Friday, March 17th. God, what a week. It ain't getting any better. So anyway, we're late start. I apologize for that. My schedule just keeps bumping around. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about today. So I want to jump in. Let me just say a bunch of news broke right after kind of I'd already determined the topics and got everything ready. So what I want to do is I just want to run through a bunch of stories quickly. You know, if any of them still have legs next week, we can delve more deeply into them. But some important ones: the International Criminal Court just issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin, primarily focused on the basically kidnapping of Ukrainian children and sending them over to Russia. I am a big opponent of the International Criminal Court, so I think it's an illegitimate institution. However, I support anybody who's going after Putin is a good thing. But I don't support this particular action, primarily because once you accept this action, then you have to accept everything the court does, or legitimacy of the court, or the very existence of the court. It is not a legitimate enterprise, and we can talk about that sometime. So while I despise Putin and hope he gets what he deserves, this isn't the mechanism by which to do it. You know, lab leak. So this week, yesterday or today, a study came out saying, wait a minute, hold on a second. It's not yet really clear that it's a lab leak because we now have this new data set of DNA swabs taken at the Wuhan marketplace from the animals that were there or after the animals were cleared out. And basically this new study finds a link between COVID-19 and raccoon dogs. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of a raccoon dog, but it's a cross between a dog and a raccoon. It has that kind of stripe of raccoon-like. Bottom line is, we still don't know. I think the preponderance of the evidence is still on the lab leak, but there is other evidence suggesting that it's not, that it was in the market. Of course, it could have been that a human being brought it to the market, infected the animals from the lab. That is definitely possible. It could also be that the animals did get it from a bat and it was an animal-to-human transmission, probably through these raccoon dogs. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows, but there is new data coming out all the time. But for those of you out there who are certain, who know one way or the other, beware. This is facts. That's what matters. Truth is what matters, not the sustaining of any particular theory, but truth. So more data still to come. Russia presented an award to the fighter pilot who downed the U.S. drone. Yet they denied that they downed the U.S. drone, but he still got an award for downing the U.S. drone, which wasn't downed by the Russians. Anyway, there's video evidence now that clearly was downed by the drone. And finally, it does really look like Donald Trump will be indicted next week. This is going to be fun. He's going to be indicted in New York over his payments to I forget her name, but the porn actress to keep her quiet. And I guess that is illegal. But isn't it pretty amazing that we've probably got the lead candidate in the Republican Party, the conservative, religious right political party, who clearly has an association with, we're not going to argue the specifics of the case here, but clearly has an association with, a significant association with a porn actress. He is running in the Republican primaries in which evangelicals and religious right people will vote, and he is, without a doubt, the leading candidate, and it's likely that his indictment linking him even more to a porn actress, and he's not denying the link to the porn actress, will actually probably increase his support among evangelical. Isn't that kind of pretty amazing? I mean, it used to be that you had to be really on this kind of stuff, really, clean in order to run, particularly in the Republican Party, even the Democrats. Do you remember, Democratic candidates having to drop out because they had affairs and all this stuff? I mean, this guy, affairs, God. I mean, maybe this is how we understand Tate's appeal. This is the same people who love Tate for the same reasons love Donald Trump, but with Trump it's much broader, of course. But it's pretty amazing that how you behave, your persona. You remember when character mattered? You remember when that was the slogan of the Republican Party? Character matters. I mean, that is a deeply philosophical point. Character does matter, let me tell you guys. Hugely matters. And it should certainly matter when it comes to the President of the United States. Character doesn't matter anymore. To hell with character. Who cares about character? As long as we get the left. And Scott playing his role as personifying exactly this attitude is on our chat so that we can get firsthand evidence of that. All right, all of that aside, there's the other point I'll just make quickly is, because we're going to lean into a story related to this some extent, is banks, just horror still continues. Bank stocks are declining significantly again today, in spite of the big banks providing $30 billion of deposits into First Republic. First Republic stock is down like 20-something%, and banks across the board are still down dramatically. It is truly amazing what is going on. This crisis is going to be bigger than I expected. It's going to be wider than I expected, deeper than I expected. It's going to take longer than I expected. And there's no question that it is going to have profound economic consequences. So, you might not be exposed to it right now because you're not invested in bank stocks and you're not, your deposits are probably safe. But fasten the seatbelt because this is going to impact everybody. This is not going to end. Here next week, the Fed decides on interest rates. That's going to have profound consequences to the market and to the economy. Interesting times. So the first story I wanted to talk about is related to this, and that is, and generally the theme of the rest few stories are the nutty left. Although for every one of them there is at least for this one, there is a parallel in the nutty right as well. But the first nutty left story that I want to talk about is basically the response of the left to SVB and what happened, Silicon Valley Bank, and how it has brought out of the left, and the more radical left you get, the more out there left you get, the more you get of this, is their underlying hatred of venture capital and the underlying hatred of startups and the whole startup culture and tech and all of that. And what is fascinating to me about all that is the very fact that what's fascinating about it is the fact that the crazy right agrees with this. That is, the attack on venture capital community, the attack on startups, the attack on tech as a consequence of SVB is not unique to the left, but it is more nutty on the left, and it's more visible on the left, and it's more vocal on the left, and it's also more understandable on the left. But it's definitely on the right. It's definitely on the libertarian right, on the conservative right, the people who want to see the world burn in order to, because there's too many leftists in the world, so let's burn it all down. And Silicon Valley should burn because they're all a bunch of leftists. That exists on the right, but this is an interesting take from the left. Anyway, there's a bunch of different going from moderate to all-out crazy. So let's start with Matthew Iglesias is a leftist economist, a left of center economist. He actually sometimes writes pretty good things. He's an interesting thinker. He's got I think a very good view of immigration. He can be quite interesting sometimes, but God, this brought out the worst in him. Matt tweeted, in my opinion, everyone. He says everyone loves the free market and hates bailouts until it's their money on the line. And he's citing the venture capitalists, the relatively people who are relatively free market types within the venture capitalist community. That's funny on several fronts, right? And I've talked about this. What free market? So we have a free market right now, and bailing out SVB is a violation of the free market, so we should be opposed to bailing out SVB because we believe in free markets. I mean, where do these people live? Where are the free markets that they talk of, that SVB is a part of? Banking is the most regulated, the most controlled industry in the United States. It is far from a free market. It is a regulated market. It is almost at the level of, and maybe is at the level of, a public utility. That is, it's a government utility. It's run by the government. I called it a government business, a private partnership, but that's a way too nice of a term to call it. This is pure, fascism in America, the way banks are run. I think I told the story. I've told it many times. I don't know what the number is today, but 10 years ago, 150 regulators went to work at the Chase Manhattan headquarters every single day to regulate Chase Manhattan. Every decision the CEO ultimately had to be signed off by a regulator sitting in an office across the hall from the CEO. That's the free market we're trying to save? Give me a break. In a free market, there is no government-provided deposit insurance. In a free market, there are no massive regulations about reserve requirements and kind of securities that a bank can invest in and kind of everything that it can do. Every single aspect of a bank is controlled. This isn't a failure of free markets, it's a failure of government intervention. And Matt is smart enough to know this. He knows we don't live in a free market. I mean, he celebrates the fact that we don't live in a free market. It's the position of this free market versus bailouts and all of the people who love the free market now oppose bailouts when they should just let the market rip when it's not free. Is just disingenuous and dishonest and disappointing. And then you discover the true sentiment. In a tweet later, he writes, that was at 4 p.m. On March 10th. This is the 9:30 p.m. on March 10th. He writes, if I ran the FDIC, I'd be tempted to deliberately wipe out all SVB deposits over $250,000 and then halt contagion by saying I'm doing it that way specifically because the All In podcast hosts are annoying, but anyone else in need will be rescued. Now, the All In podcast is a hugely successful podcast run by David Sachs, who is one of these relatively free market venture capitalists, who called for the bailout, the government bailout of SVB, and he's the one being accused. Oh, you support free markets, except when. I mean, Matt knows that what happened at SVB, because of the kind of regulatory system we have, because of the way banks are constructed in the U.S., and because of the role of government in them, the failure of SVB was clearly about to erode trust in the entire banking system, which clearly posed an existential risk to the entire financial system and the entire U.S. economy. Now, I think Matt Iglesias knows this. That's why he wants to back the deposit at every other bank except Silicon Valley Bank. And why do they not want to bail out Silicon? Because who holds those 250,000, above 250,000 deposits? Startups. They hate startups. It is startups in the end, not the bank, but the startups in the end are the last fragment of a bastion of a little bit of freedom in the United States. They're the last bastion of free markets left. Startups, venture capital is not regulated. The venture capitalists can put it pretty much into anything they want. They can invest, they can lose money, they can make money. It's not controlled and regulated. Startups can, unless you're in biotech, can pretty much try anything, produce anything. It's still a little piece of a tiny little piece of our world that is permissionless. And this is what they hate. This is what they despise. Their hatred of capitalism is coming out. And the fact that there are people on the right who agree with this is so disgusting and despicable. The one area, Yes, they might be woke. Yes, they might be leftist running these companies, but the one area in which we are allowing freedom is Silicon Valley, is startups, is venture capitalists. We should be defending that and wanting to expand it to the rest of the country. So here we have a leading center-left economist basically saying, no, let the startups, let them all fail. Let them all go bankrupt. Let them not make payroll. Now, he's doing it tongue-in-cheek, granted. He's making this about the podcast. But this is not an issue to laugh at. This is a serious issue. People's lives depend on this. The entire, one would argue, potentially the entire U.S. economy depends on this. So, making light and making fun and making jokes on this particular issue, not appropriate, Matt. And it brings out this disdain you have for some of the most, if not the most, productive people in America / the world today. All right, let's see. And look, Matt later had a long-form article. And in that long-form article, he said one of the real problems in the United States is we should have bigger banks. But his view of bigger banks is basically they're nationalized. The banks are nationalized. And basically, you know, we have to get rid of all these little banks, let them all fail. And, you know, there's a sense in which what we need is bigger banks. We need more freedom in banking. We need to get rid of these little banks by allowing them to merge and consolidate and by deregulating, getting it out. And the answer here is not either bail out SVB or don't bail out SVB, and those are the only choices you have philosophically, ideologically. The answer could very well be bail out SVP and institute policies so that a bailout is never, ever, ever possible again in the future. And the only way to do that is by completely unwinding all the bank regulations and liberating banks from deposit insurance and liberating us from the regulatory burden. The idea that if you support a bailout of SVB, you're anti-free market is absurd because there is no free market. This system is corrupt. This system is sick. This system is wrong. This system needs to be completely scrapped, and we need to start over. And whether the banks want it or don't want it, it doesn't matter. Now the banks are used to it. It's what they got. So what we need today is to scrap the banking system and start it over. On the basis of freedom, on the basis of property rights, on the basis of voluntary interaction. Anyway, Kara Swisher, another leftist commentator out there who is basically loves Joe Biden, and she had mixed opinions here, right? So one day she's supporting Mark Cuban, voice of reason for Mark Cuban, and a very good point to focus on, small entrepreneurs. And Mark Cuban wrote, the tragedy of SVB is that it's not the wealthy taking the hit, it's the thousands of companies who borrowed from SVB and were required to keep their cash in SVB. These entrepreneurs and their employees and vendors are feeling the pain, and they are who the Fed should protect. By the way, it sounds like required to keep their cash at SVB sounds like some conspiracy theory. That's how banks work. You take a loan from a bank. One of the conditions of the loan is that you have your cash at the bank because the bank wants those deposits so they can make other loans. It's how the system works. So she's supporting a bailout, basically. And then the next day she says, another responsible voice, somebody else, a much needed one given the scream memes of VCs. And this guy says, tens of thousands of banks have failed throughout the U.S. history, have lost at least some money in most of these failures, but somehow this particular bank failure is going to lead to an almost complete collapse of the banking sector. 16th largest bank in the U.S. And again, I'm fine with not having a bailout or having a bailout. My point is neither of those options is a good option. The only thing that really matters is what happens afterwards. What do you do with the banking system? The banking system as a system is screwed up, is messed up. So she one day is for a bailout, the next day is against a bailout. But in the end, because Biden was for a bailout, she switched and was for a bailout. All right, let's see. And, you know, it goes on. There are others. I want to get to the really nasty one. So the really nasty one came from Slate magazine, slate.com, and some guy named Edward Ongweso. And Edward Ongweso writes for the Jacobean magazine. Jacobean, you know what Jacobean? That's a reference to the French Revolution, the guillotines. This is a magazine, I guess, that thinks the guillotines were a good idea. But maybe next time, instead of having aristocrats guillotined, maybe we should have venture capitalists guillotined. This is his tweet. My debut at Slate. Venture capitalists are parasites who couldn't be trusted with financial institutions that held up their industry, let alone the direction of our technology development. Euthanizing them is imperative if we want a better world. Now, people objected to the euthanizing them, which is not my main objection, but because they thought, oh, he's advocating for the guillotine for venture capitalists. And he defends himself and he said, no, what I mean, you know, he basically wants to euthanize the profession. He wants to get rid of the idea of venture capital. That's my problem. I understood it that way, not he wants to kill them personally. Although, note that he is calling for euthanizing people, and yet Twitter's fine with that. I guess that doesn't count as hate speech. Venture capitalists are parasites who can't be trusted. And indeed, what the Jacobean magazine is calling for, and what more and more voices on left and right are calling for these days, is to get rid of the mechanism of market allocation of capital, market decision on what technology we should invest in, supporting winners and versus supporting winners and losers, choosing between them, making capital allocations in technology. And what both left and right now are unifying around is, no, we don't need them. Euthanize them. What we really need is central planning. What we really need is a government. And this is, Edward is explicitly, because he's a Marxist and he writes a Jacobean magazine again, so a purely socialist magazine. He wants the government to take over the job of the venture capitalists. But if you look at the proposals, economic proposals coming out of Republicans, from Josh Hawley all the way to Donald Trump, and I guess you could rope in DeSantis into this, they want central planners. They want the government to be allocating capital. They want to decide who the winners and losers. They don't want these venture capitalist cowboy guys making those decisions out there in the world independently. So crazy, nutty views on SVB coming from the left and a little bit from the right. Kind of scary. All right. Yeah, you can read his whole article on slate.com, this guy, Edward Ongweso. Ugh. All right, let's see. What was the next topic? Yeah, San Francisco. Talk about crazy leftist ideas. So San Francisco Board of Supervisors is backing $5 million of reparation for every black resident of San Francisco. $5 million. To quote the plan, it includes $5 million to every eligible black adult, the elimination of personal debt and tax burdens, guaranteed annual income of at least $97,000 for 250 years, and homes in San Francisco for just $1 a family. Now, the reparation panel is continuing its work and is going to make kind of their final proposal with numbers and everything in June, right? I mean, this is insane. With all due respect to everybody, there was no slavery in San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco did some bad things. They didn't treat the Chinese very well, and they certainly didn't treat the Japanese during World War II very well. But San Francisco never had slavery. So the people living in San Francisco might have ancestors who were slave owners, might not, probably don't. San Francisco as a place, certainly to the extent that a place can feel guilty about something, has no guilt associated with this. It's just bizarre. The whole thing is just ridiculous. I mean, the whole idea of reparations 250, 150 years later is ridiculous. But for San Francisco, it's doubly ridiculous. I can understand somebody saying South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, okay. But San Francisco, really? The plan, if implemented, would cost $600,000 per household living in San Francisco. $600,000. I mean, who has $600,000? I mean, some people in San Francisco do, but $600,000. Now, there are some people who would like to see this happen just out of morbid curiosity, right? Of San Francisco's seeing their taxes go up as much as they would have to go up to get to the 600,000. Not to mention what would happen to real estate properties with the government giving them away for $1. If you want to see the world burn, if you want to see the end of civilization, reparations to San Francisco based on this plan, that is the way to go. That is the way to do. Let's see. Let's see. All right, Stanford Law School. Here's another doozy. Right? Let's see if I've got these. Sorry. Oh, I have it here. All right, so, whoops, no thanks. So Stanford Law School on March 9th, the Federalist Society at Stanford. I've spoken at the Federalist Society in Stanford years and years and years ago. I do a lot of my talks. I've done a lot of talks at Federal Society chapters all over the country. Did a couple a few months ago. Anyway, on March 9th, a Fifth Circuit judge, federal judge, Judge Cal Duncan, was invited to speak at the Stanford Law School for the Fed Sox. This is a Trump appointee. He's quite conservative. He's conservative on a lot of social issues that I oppose, but he is a Fifth Circuit judge. I mean, this is a guy who has a lot of power, a lot of influence, and has obviously achieved a lot in his career to get to this point. Anyway, he started making his remarks. There were about 100 people in the audience, and clearly many of them were there to protest. I'd say most of them were there to protest. He couldn't get a word in edgewise. Every time he spoke, people would make a noise and would jeer and would stop him from speaking. It's a common practice. I've experienced this at Exeter University and many other places over the years. They've done it to me. Anyway, they were doing it to the judge, and he couldn't get a word in edgewise. They were yelling, they were screaming. Every time they'd quiet down and let him speak, they would yell, and he would start speaking, they would yell. And so it's this tactic of getting you going and then shutting you down, getting you going, shutting you down, which is particularly disgusting. Anyway, at some point, the judge, there were administrators, university administrators in the audience because they knew it would be a little contentious, so they came. So at some point, the judge appealed to the administrators, said, look, free speech, we rented this place, they're using force against us. This is wrong. This is not what free speech should look like. And administrators said, fine. And at that point, Tyrion Steinbach, the school's diversity dean, went up on stage, basically in front of the class, and basically said, we need to restore order here, people. We need to restore order here. And then she took the podium and started going after the judge. Like, it's his talk. He's supposed to talk. She's supposed to create order so that he can talk. But no, she doesn't let him talk. She then goes into a rant about how horrible he is and how he is causing harm. And then at which point he opens it up to a Q&A for the students. Right? This is some of the quotes from by the way, from this dean with regard to the judge. And whether you agree with this or not, that's not relevant. Your opinions from the bench land as absolute disenfranchisement. Do you have something so incredibly important to say, she asked him, that is worth the division of these people? Right? So she's basically shutting him up. And issues of free, she says, you know, I'm here to defend free speech, the free speech code of Stanford University. And then she kind of implies, well, I don't really agree with this free speech code in Stanford University. I kind of wish we didn't have this free speech code in Stanford University so that I could formally shut you down and shut you out. And there's video of the whole thing, so you can find video of the whole thing on there. This is, you know, since then, remember there were three senior administrators there watching this whole thing and not interfering and not doing anything about it. In prep for this talk, the opposition to the FedSoc put out posters with the pictures of the FedSoc members. These are students saying you should be ashamed and listing them in pictures, which I think is just clearly intimidation. Just horror. Just horror. You can't speak. You can't debate. You can't discuss. You can't disagree. The weapon of the authoritarian is force. And these leftists are authoritarians. They want to ban speech that they disagree with. They don't want people to be able to speak, even when they pay for their own hall and bring in their own speaker and organize their own event. They're not allowed to speak. And this is clearly a violation of free speech. This is clearly where university security should have cleared these people out. It's horrific how I've seen this over the last 20 years. This behavior used to be prevalent even 20 years ago, particularly when I used to give talks on Islam and on the war post 9/11. But in those days, security was there. They'd wait a little bit, and at some point they'd say, okay, you've had your fun, enough is enough. You either shut up or we're clearing you out of the auditorium. And you can demonstrate outside, but you can't demonstrate inside. And that's gone. Now, no, it's complete mayhem. I invite somebody to speak in a room that I signed and everything's prepared. I paid money, I've done all this stuff. A bunch of protesters come in and they can shut down the event, and there's nothing anybody will do about it. It's just, there's no, you know, there's no understanding meaning of free speech, and there's no defense of free speech today on our campuses. And, you know, this is Stanford University, the #2 rated law school in the country. #2 rated law school in the country. You cannot argue conservative ideas. You cannot make a presentation about conservative ideas at Stanford University. Even when you're invited to do so. Now, what's happened since is the law school has apologized. There was a huge uproar against this. The law school has apologized. The dean has apologized. The president of the university has got involved. So, you know, but Tyrion Steinbach, the school's diversity dean, is not losing her job. She should. She should be fired, particularly given that she's got this dean of diversity title. She should be fired, but they won't fire her. Indeed, continued demonstrations are going on Stanford campus at the law school, not on the side of those who want free speech, but those on the side that think too much free speech was already granted, and who want now the dean of the law school to apologize for their apology. Stanford, a bastion of science and engineering and one of the great universities in all of human history. This is how low it has sunk. It is truly, I've talked about Stanford before, it's sunk low in many, many dimensions, but this is one of them, and it's truly horrible to watch. All right, let's see. We had one other topic, also kind of nutty. Okay, Wellesley College. Wellesley College, all women's college. You know, really one of the top universities, certainly for women in the country, in the world. Liberal arts college, quite liberal. Anyway, the Wellesley student government voted this week to abolish all language of being a women's college. They don't want to be a women's college anymore. We'll see what kind of college they want to be, but abolish the term woman, and to use gender-neutral terms like students or alumni instead of women. Also, they want to scrap all women-specific admission criteria and to open instead to all gender non-conforming people. And it's interesting, it turns out that women, even though there is no such category according to them, but women are non-conforming gender people because they're not men. The only conforming gender is male, and they should not be allowed in the school. But if you're a trans man, trans woman, if you're a woman, I don't know if you're allowed to say you're a woman. I don't know if that actually constitutes a gender. Anyway, all those other options are banned, should be banned. They voted to open admission to trans men. So that, according to them, there would be men, women who identify as men, it's okay to be at Wesleyan, even though it's a women's college. So I get why they would want men who identify as women, because it's a women's college and you can include them. But the only ones they don't want, in other words, are men who identify as men. They say that the school should be a place for all people who have trouble with their gender. I guess women have trouble with their gender, which means anyone who doesn't have a penis. Oh, no, that doesn't count. You can have a penis, but if you identify as a woman, then you're okay. Sorry. This is all very confusing to me. So this is a student from class of 2024. This is all today on Barry Weiss's Substack. Wesley was founded as a women's college because they wanted to create a safe and supportive learning environment for people who are maligned based on gender. Such a place should welcome and support trans women, trans men, and non-binary people as well. Past, present, and future trans and non-binary students at Wellesley should feel like the college has their back, acknowledge their identities, and supports their access to Wesley education. Now, luckily for Wesley, I guess, this referendum is not binding, and the administration has already rejected it. It turns out there are some feminists and some lesbians, indeed, who are opposed to this and fight against this, but the administration of Wesley has rejected this, and Wesley will continue to be, at least for now, a women's college, even though my guess is the administration would not probably define women if you asked them. All right, that is what I had. I had one other story. Oh, one other wacky left story quickly, and that is just a note that over the last, 6, 7 years, and this isn't just left because this includes the Trump administration. Over the last 6, 7 years, the percentage of people arrested in D.C. who are then prosecuted by the district attorney who is appointed by the president or by the administration. So it was somebody appointed by Trump in his 4 years, and now somebody appointed by Biden, has decreased dramatically, so that now only about 30% of arrests actually lead to prosecution, which is just stunning, and that includes felony crimes. So that's, you can look this up and just put in DC prosecuting crime, and you can see the graph. You can see it was kind of, the decrease in prosecution started under Obama, accelerated under Trump, and even doubly accelerated under Biden. Hard to tell what the explanation is, but it is nutty, and this is the kind of stuff that encourages criminals. Right? They're not going to be prosecuted, even if they're arrested. Who cares? All right, let's jump into the questions. Let me just say something about this. When I say something about SVB again, when I say bailout, no bailout, either way, that's not the issue. It's not that I don't care. What I care about is that we recognize the true problem, and the true problem is government regulations. When people advocate for one side or another without arguing that the fundamental cause is the very nature of the regulations and that the only solution is ultimately to get rid of them all, they're all wrong. Right, left, in the middle. When somebody argues, when I say, bail them out, don't bail them out, I don't care. What I mean is I don't care if you take those positions if, in addition, you actually said let's use this as an opportunity to get rid of government regulations, get rid of deposit insurance, and put the American banking system on a true free market basis. But if you're not saying that, then all of your views, no matter what position you take, are false and wrong. In particular, if you're making the case in the name of free markets, then it's completely unequivocally dishonest. And those of you who want to let SVB fail because it's Silicon Valley, but want to bail out Signature Bank that failed 2 days later because it's not Silicon Valley, I mean, that's just despicable and disgusting. And that's what Matt Iglesias was kind of implying, right? All right, we are about halfway to our goal, so please consider. We've got over 100 people watching again, so again, $200 from each person watch. Sorry, $2, not even $200. $2. $2, you know, is good. Right. All right. All right, let's talk about Wes. When I was younger, hearing someone say free market will solve problems sounded like God will solve our problem. I didn't get it until I read Ayn Rand. Any advice on explaining how the free market works to someone who is skeptical? I think the best, I mean, first of all, it's very difficult because there's a lot of complexity to it. For example, what was a banking system look like in a free market? It is not simple. And of course, in a free market, some banks occasionally will fail, although history suggests very few, particularly when you set up the free market for banking in the right way, right? Which America never did. The United States never had a well-constructed free banking system. It always was massively flawed. Scotland and Canada had much better banking systems than the U.S. Had. So I think that the best example is to take an area where we have relative freedom, where we have free markets. And, you know, for example, I use my iPhone, right? And I say, you know, imagine if this was designed by the government, what would it look like? If there was a lot of regulation determining the thickness and the size and what apps could run on it and how you could use your finger and what movements of your finger were legit and what moves of the finger the government deemed bad and what buttons were okay and what buttons were not. What do you think the iPhone would look like if the government had those kind of regulations on it? And everybody gets it. They all start laughing. They think that's ridiculous. And yeah, if government designed the iPhone, that would be really, really, really horrible and disgusting and awful. And you say, look, yeah, I mean, for the most part, the iPhone functions in a free market. People can buy it or not buy it. It's up to them. The iPhone's success is determined by whether they buy it or not. That's it. iPhone competitors have gone out of business because it was more successful. Remember, what do you call that Canadian company that used to sell phones that did email? I used to have one. BlackBerries. You remember BlackBerries, right? And so some companies will go out of business, but they go out of business because they can't compete. They make mistakes. They don't compete well, and it doesn't then, you know, affect the entire world, right? When BlackBerry went under, nobody even paid attention. Nobody even noticed. Why do you think it is that if SVB fails and deposits are not guaranteed, the entire banking system might collapse? How is that possible? Why is it in a free market, in a market that's relatively free, not a free market, in a market that's relatively free, a failure of a company is almost non-noticeable, and in a bank it is so noticeable. And then you can say it's because of all those regulations. Because those regulations caused the failure, and those regulations exist in every other bank. Yes, it's true. SVB made some bad investments, but if you look at the bank's balance sheets, almost every bank in the country made the same investments. Some more than others. The difference between SVB and every other bank is that SVB had 93% of uninsured deposits. Now, that's a bad thing in a regulated environment with deposit insurance being the key to all banking. But in a free market, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a virtue. The banking businesses who have a lot of money in their bank, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So yes, the investments weren't that good, but those investments in and of themselves would not driven them into bankruptcy. What drove them into bankruptcy is the investments, which almost every other bank did as well, rising interest rates, and a bank run. But once a bank run is successful on one bank, we know, because we've seen this before, another bank is run on, and another bank is run on, and another bank is run on, and it's a contagion, and the whole system collapses. And then, indeed, taxpayers would have to bail out the system, or you'd have to watch it all crash and burn. And it would burn. And it would affect every one of your lives if it burned. That's all, that linkage, that connection, that contagion, that, quote, systemic risk is a function of government regulation and government control. And this is why you have to be able to talk in terms of, not do nothing. You can't not do anything when the government has created systemic risk in the system. When the government has created systemic risk in the system, it's the job of the government to at least mitigate that systemic risk until we can get rid of the system. And that's what we should be arguing for, getting rid of the system. Because that's where the corruption lies. That's where the issue lies. That's where the challenge lies. Anyway, so that's where we are. I mean, Edward says something about nationalizing the banks. I mean, the banks are effectively nationalized. I mean, too big to fail. What does that mean? It means the government runs these institutions. The Dodd-Frank on top of a gazillion regulations. What does all that mean? It means the government basically runs the institutions, these institutions. So they're not quite nationalized, but in America, banks are very close to being just government institutions. They have an element of freedom, which is small and shrinking, and a lot, which is completely and utterly controlled. And the rules that the regulators set are fungible. They change them when they want to. So don't tell me, but they're rules. But the rules mean nothing. In a world in which arbitrary government power, arbitrary government control, they can do whatever the hell they want. And of course, anyway. All right, we're $50 short. We're very, very, very close to getting there. Thank you, Stephen Harper. Thank you, Wes. Thank you, John. Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Wes, for an additional 20. Really appreciate that. Those are all people who are listening, who gave money without asking a question. Thank you, David. And thank you, Catherine, who started us off right at the beginning of the show. All right, Oscar asks, will the Federal Reserve choose to shift course and pursue a policy pivot, or will it continue to press forward with its present strategy of raising interest rates? I suspect they will raise interest rates, but they will raise it only a quarter of a point where they intended to raise it a full half point. The fact that the European Central Bank, yesterday was it, raised a full half a point, I think was indicative of the fact that there's a real commitment among the central bankers to deal with inflation, even if it creates more problems for the banks. We will see what happens with the Fed next week. It's not going to be easy. I don't expect them to cut rates. They might hold pat for this month and then raise next month. But most likely is they raise 25 basis points. Now, of course, it depends what happens over the weekend. Are more banks closed? In spite of all the quote bailout, in spite of all the money flowing into the banking system, in spite of all of that, the Fed has this program now where they're basically giving loans with the bank's bonds as collateral, which could be up to $2 trillion, huge amounts of money in spite of all of that, right? In spite of all of that, the bank stocks are just tumbling, continue to tumble. And that suggests that something is going on that we're not noticing, or the Fed's not noticing. Something is not right. Something is not right out there. And so let's see what happens on the weekend. It's going to be a very suspenseful weekend for those of us in the sector. I have no idea what Banca Monte del Paschi di Siena is. I guess he says it's the oldest bank and it's slowly dying. Thank you, James. I'm not surprised. Italian banks are not in great shape, and they are slowly dying, and they're waiting for a bailout from German banks, which are not doing great. And of course, we know what our Swiss banks are doing, particularly one of them, the one Swiss bank, Credit Suisse, that bank is in real trouble, and it was bailed out by the Swiss central bank just yesterday. Right. All right, I am way behind. We're almost at an hour, and we've got a ton of super chats. All right, Raphael says, why Ayn Rand said that if we are seeking to know what is wrong with the world, it all comes from man's attempts to evade the fact that A is A. It all boils down to that. Yeah, because it all boils down. It all comes down to. It all comes down to man evading facts, man evading reality, man refusing to use reason and rationality and logic, and as a consequence, every bad decision, every bad ethical choice or adopting a bad ethics ultimately is a consequence of evasion, of not thinking, of ignoring reality. God. I've got a guy at my bank trying to get a hold of me. I wonder if he's telling me the bank is closing. No, I don't think that's the case. But like every 2 minutes he's calling. Just give it a break. I'll call you back. Yes, so that's the point. The point is the fundamental, everything boils down to reality is what it is. And if you don't accept that, and you accept in a sense, even implicitly, the primacy of consciousness, I can sway reality, I can invent reality, I can make reality up, I can make reality what I want it to be, what I wish it to be, what I imagine it to be, that is the source of all our problems. And religion is that, right? We've got somebody trying to disrupt the channel. Look at this. Remove. All right. And he keeps switching accounts, I guess. No, I want to remove the user. Hide user on this channel. All right, there we go. All right. Okay, if we have any administrators on right now, if you could track these guys, because they keep coming back, and shut them down when they come up. Michael says, have you seen Biden's tweets lately where he's written, look, I'm a capitalist, but at least he sees the need to give lip service to capitalism. Yeah, so does Elizabeth Warren. So do most of the left. So does the right. Everybody seems to want to embrace the concept of capitalism and then completely undermine it, completely destroy it. And that is worse than if he just said he was a socialist and get it over with. Much worse. Very, very dangerous. Liam says, are intellectuals stubborn in upholding bad ideas because they have low self-esteem? It's only one of the reasons, but not the only reason. Power lust, you could argue power lust as a consequence of low self-esteem. Power lust, inability to conceive of anything else, and a fear of trying. So fear. So there are a lot of reasons, but low self-esteem is part of it. I don't think it's the only motivation, even though it's part of it. Oh, it looks like Vladimir Putin has showed up on my chat here. Sorry, I'm trying not to ban one of you guys, because I did that once in an attempt to ban a spammer. I banned somebody I didn't want to ban, and it was very difficult to get him back on. All right, Ian Meerkat asks, who cares about character? Owning the libs is the only thing that matters in this world. Don't let the truth get in your way. Yep. I mean, that's what a lot of people think, even people on my chat. Hopper Campbell, are most people thoroughly corrupt or mildly corrupt? I think most people are mildly corrupt. And then they, if you consider just drifting as thoroughly corrupt, then maybe they're thoroughly corrupt, but they've made some corruption in their mind early on, this evasion, And then they just drift from that point on. But it's hard to psychologize and figure out exactly what's driving people. Roland says, in Hungary, you can hardly find a Christian conservative politician anymore who hasn't been involved in some ultra-filthy sex scandal. Maybe that's why they love Orban so much, because Orban has legitimized Christian conservatives, and in his case, Catholic conservatives, as also being okay with sex scandals. Maybe that's why American conservatives are so committed to this. Michael says, why are the banks failing suddenly? Will people lose their jobs? It seems to me that these econ downturns happen randomly. Either that or the media doesn't give us any early warning. No, it's not random. The reason it's happening now is because interest rates have gone up and because the venture capital market has declined because of fears of recession and because it's very hard to raise venture capital right now, and venture capitalists are not making investments in companies that are then not depositing money in the bank, so that so it's a consequence of rising interest rates and fears of recession that are making a recession real and have caused this crisis, and it's a consequence of the structure of the way banks are regulated, the way financial institutions are regulated. But the reason it's now is because of rising interest rates and the fear of recession, which has led to venture capital being, basically not being aggressive, not investing, and not raising new capital. And the same, and you can include crypto in part of that, right? And this is why Silvergate shut down, because of crypto, and Signature probably because of somewhat of crypto. But anyway, a lot going on there. Let's see. Frank, wouldn't Ayn Rand demand objective money to integrate with reality as opposed to subjective crypto or intrinsic fiduciary state-determined value? Yes, Ayn Rand would want an objective money, but and she viewed that as gold. But the reality is that in a capitalist economy, the beauty is there's competition, and if you can come up with a different, better way of creating objective money, or a world in which, a different form of objective money, then so be it. I mean, the beauty of a marketplace is it will clear out the way and give you the right kind of money at the end of the competitive process. But what you need for that is freedom. Hamad, how excited are you for Apple Musical launching soon? Dedicated classical music app with unique layout, with ability to search by composer. I'm super excited about it. And I've kind of lost excitement because I thought it was coming out last year. They promised it last year. And now they say it's coming out anytime. So until it actually comes out, I'm not excited. But having a classical music app, an app dedicated to classical music linked to Apple Music, super exciting. It'll change the way I listen to music, because it's very, very difficult to search and to browse and to use to access classical music on a regular music app. You need a dedicated app, and that's what Apple is promising. We'll see if it comes true. Frank says, can blacks sue southern states for reparations? I don't think so, and I don't think they should be able to. Michael asks, do you think qualified immunity should end? Yes. I mean, the legal system has to figure out what kind of liability cops should have, and what constitutes the kind of liability that they should lose lawsuits on. I don't think that's an easy issue, but I think qualified immunity where they're given a pass on liability is wrong. So, but exactly what is right, exactly the mechanism by which you hold cops accountable is not easy. It's tricky to do. James says, what do you think of UAE and Saudi hiring Western professionals and creating joint programs with top universities? Do you think they will follow nutty lefty things happening? Do you think they will allow nutty left things to happen in our lifetime? I don't think they have enough power to stop nutty left things from happening, but I'm not crazy about UAE and Saudi hiring all these people. I'm not crazy about, countries that are fundamentally immoral and illegitimate because they happen to have a bunch of oil, being able to use that in order to hire some of the best people in the world to do all the things that they do and to build up wealth in these countries. I find that whole idea as horrifying. Ryan asks, I find this financial stuff interesting and I'm thinking about changing my major. Would it be better to study economics at a liberal state school or get a math degree if I want to work in finance? Yeah, if you want to work in finance, studying economics is useless. You either want to study finance with the idea ultimately of getting a master's in finance or going to math. But I think that going through economics, if you want a finance career, is unlikely to yield results. Michael says, prior to the Fed, how did interest rates work? Supply and demand for money. What was Woodrow Wilson's reasoning for establishing the Fed? It doesn't seem to have done anything good. It doesn't. The reasoning was power and control. The rationalization was to bring stability to the banking system. The Federal Reserve was supposed to stabilize the banking system. Then it actually created the Great Depression. That's how stable it was. So interest rates were basically supply and demand for investable funds, for savings. So you saved money, interest rate determined how much people wanted to save, how much people wanted to deposit in regular accounts, how much people wanted to borrow money. All of that goes into supply and demand, basically, and that determines interest rates, not a central planner. Of course, the proposed solutions for the crisis caused by central bankers and regulations is for more regulations and more power to central bankers. Of course, American philosopher asked, maybe AI productivity gains will save us from inflation like tech was since 2008. Yeah, I mean, AI could save us from a lot of things. I mean, it could increase productivity significantly and raise standard of living in spite of us, in spite of how bad our policies are. Okay, so look, Philippe Noel asked, is an MBA worthless nowadays? I don't think so. I think an MBA from the top programs is still valuable. It's still valued by the marketplace. It's a diploma. It's a good way to switch career paths. It's a good way. It's a good degree to take it to the next level. It's not about learning as much as it is about ticking the box and doing what's necessary to achieve certain goals in the workplace. You need an MBA still. It's like a diploma. Well, it is a diploma, but it's helpful, but it's not. I don't think it ever was crucial. Some of the most successful people in business never went to business school. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're running a little late, over an hour. That's not good. I will talk to you tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time. Not sure what the topic will be, but it will be, we will talk then. And Richard says, hi, Yaron. What do you think are the biggest differences between Israeli schools and American schools? If you don't mind my asking, what were the most important considerations choosing a school for your kids? I mean, schools in Israel were more British, were more structured, were more traditional, classical, if you want. They were more rigorous. American schools, my experience of American schools, looser, lower standards, less rigorous, low expectations, much lower expectations. Much more emphasis on math and science, at least when I was growing up in Israel, than there was in the United States. For my kids, I look for a good Montessori school, a school that seemed to follow the Montessori method. And then, basically handed over to objectivists for schooling. All right, I really do have to run, guys, so I appreciate, Richard, the support. I appreciate all the super chatters. Thank you all, and I will see you tomorrow. And if you want to support the show, yaronbookshow.com/support, PayPal, Venmo, Patreon, Subscribestar, Locals, any one of those, you can support the show.